RIP to the bantamweight division. It is now a co-main event division for title fights. Unfortunately, Merab Dvalishvili has become the bantamweight champion in the UFC, and it's dark times ahead for the bantamweight division. Now, UFC 306, also known as Riyadh Season Noche UFC, did just happen this past weekend. Merab Dvalishvili defeated Sean O'Malley to become the new bantamweight champion. Valentina Shevchenko defeated Alexa Grasso to become the new flyweight champion. And Diego Lopes defeated Brian Ortega very convincingly. There's some other fights on the card, but we're going to focus on those three in today's video because we have fights to make after Noche UFC. So stick around to the end of the video to hear my thoughts on who these 6 fighters should be facing in their next matchup following Noche UFC. I'm Wyatt. This is Fight Society. Before we get into the video, I do have a very interesting idea for Brian Ortega down here, so we'll get to that at the end of the video. But before that, please make sure to click that like and subscribe down at the bottom. It really helps me out a lot. Now, we will start off with the new bantamweight champion, the winner of the main event, Merab Dvalishvili. Many people are like, okay, Umar is the next guy. He beat Cory Sandhagen. Merab and Umar is going to be the next title fight at 135 pounds, most likely in Abu Dhabi or Saudi Arabia. It seems like it would make sense for them to do that. But in my opinion, I still think it's going to be Umar. But in my opinion, who I think should be fighting for the belt over Umar is former flyweight champion Deiveson Figueiredo. Now, the reason that I say this is because he's a former champion in another weight class. He's proven a very, very entertaining fight style most of the time. He gets finishes, and he also has ranked wins over Rob Font and Chito Vera, and he also beat Cody Garbrandt, former champion, submitted him in the first round, I think it was at UFC 300. Now, if you look at Umar's only impressive win is Sandhagen, and it was an undeserved shot. He still won the fight, so I can't knock him for that. But in terms of, even if you just go off of ranked wins, I think that Deiveson Figueiredo makes for a more fun fight. I think his scrambles are really good. I think Umar is going to get the fight against Merab. I think Umar probably is going to beat Merab, to be honest. But I think that Deiveson Figueiredo is much more deserving of a bantamweight title shot than Umar Nurmagomedov, just given ranked wins. And I guess you can throw him one for Cody Garbrandt, even though Cody Garbrandt's not ranked anymore. It is a former champion in that division. So, and by finish. So that's why I think Merab Dvalishvili should be facing off with Deiveson Figueiredo next, but that is not going to happen. I'm almost certain it's going to be Umar. Now, we move on from there to the main event loser. Suga O'Malley lost his bantamweight title to Merab Dvalishvili in a very, very disappointing performance for Sean O'Malley. Essentially didn't show up. There was points where, especially at the end of the 5th round, where he had Merab hurt with front kicks to the body, and he didn't follow up. I don't know what happened. It was just one of those nights for O'Malley. It was not a great performance. Very frustrating, very underwhelming. What's next for Sean O'Malley? Well, I think it's the fight that I was hoping to see anyway, and I thought it wasn't going to happen because this fighter lost to Umar Nurmagomedov in August, and I thought Sean O'Malley was going to beat Merab. So I thought their careers were going to go in a little bit different directions for the time being. But given that they're both coming off of losses, probably the most exciting matchup in the bantamweight division right now that you absolutely have to make. This is the most no-brainer matchup. Sean O'Malley and Cory Sandhagen. You have to make this fight. Striker's dream. Amazing matchup. Winner gets to work back towards a title shot. This is a pay-per-view co-main event. This is a crowded fight night main event. Maybe throw it as a co-main event on the Conor card when that comes around, if Conor fights in January or February. I think that that would add some heat to it with the press conference, given that Sean O'Malley and Conor have been slightly beefing. I think you absolutely have to make this fight. I didn't think it was going to be plausible because I thought O'Malley would win this weekend, and I thought, you know, he'd be facing an Umar or Figueiredo or even moving up to fight Topuria, but he lost, and I think that Sandhagen versus O'Malley is the 1,000% fight to make at 135 pounds. We move on from there to Valentina Shevchenko, who just became the once again and new women's flyweight champion by dominating Alexa Grasso. Alexa Grasso really never got anything going. I think that that performance from Valentina Shevchenko was plenty to wrap up this rivalry, given that the fight that was a draw, she should have won as well. I personally think we can move on from Grasso versus Shevchenko, because if they want to hang on to Grasso Shevchenko and do a fourth fight like they did with Davison Figueiredo and Brandon Moreno, then they're going to hold it off for another year until the next Noche UFC. And that's what they did. They fought Noche UFC 23 and then took a year off, and they fought again at Noche 2024. So if they were to do a rematch, I feel that they would hold it off until Noche 2025, which is just unfair to the rest of the division, especially when you have Manon Fior deserves a title shot. You have Blanchfield, Namajunas, Macy Barber. There's a lot of people up around there that are close to title shots, and I don't think you can stall the division for another year. So I think you move on from the Grasso-Shevchenko rivalry, and I think that you should do Manon Fior against Valentina Shevchenko for the women's flyweight strap. I think it makes a lot of sense. She just beat Erin Blanchfield in very convincing fashion. I think that this fight, both heavy kickboxers, even though Valentina does like to grapple when she can, I think that this will be a very fun striking fight. Good pay-per-view co-main. Maybe if they do a pay-per-view in Europe, that it would make a lot of sense. And yeah, that's a pay-per-view co-main all day long. So maybe December, maybe January or February. It just depends on what they line out for early 2025, because the rumor is that the Saudis did pay a $40 million site fee to do another UFC event in early 2025. I could see that card being, even though I think Figueiredo should get the title shot, I can see that card very, very easily being Merab versus Umar main event, Valentina Shevchenko, Manon Fior co-main event. But in my opinion, division has to move on. We can't do a fourth fight between Grasso and Shevchenko. I think this rivalry's been decided until Grasso can maybe get a couple more wins, but I think it's been decided for now. We move on to Alexa Grasso, who just lost her women's 125-pound championship in dominant fashion to Valentina Shevchenko. She doesn't need to turn around and fight super fast. I think she's one win away from potentially getting another title shot, or like an impressive win away. I'm sure they'd want to do the fourth fight with Shevchenko at some point, but they can't stall the division. So I think what you do, co-main event, it was originally the main event of UFC Edmonton on November 2nd, but it has now been bumped down to the co-main event because Brandon Moreno versus Amir Albazi is the new main event. I think you have Alexa Grasso fight the loser of Erin Blanchfield and Rose Namajunas. I think you do this because the winner of this fight, of those two between Blanchfield and Namajunas, will probably, especially if it's Rose, fight the winner of Fior and Shevchenko. And you know what? They might even put Rose in there above Manon Fior, but I think what you do, you have Shevchenko and Fior fight. Winner will fight the winner of Blanchfield and Namajunas, especially if it's Rose. And then the loser will fight Alexa Grasso. And then the winner, I'm planning this division out like 3 fights already. These two fight right here, Shevchenko, Fior. These two fight right here, Blanchfield and Namajunas. The winner fights the winner of Shevchenko, Manon Fior. And then Grasso fights the loser. And then the winner of Grasso versus this loser gets a title shot. There you go. There's the next year for the women's flyweight division. So we move on from there. We have Diego Lopes, who's coming off of a very impressive decision win over Brian Ortega. I thought he was going to get a first round finish. Either way, dub for Diego Lopes. He looks amazing. Brian Ortega looks kind of jaded about his career at this point, and he came out flat, and you can't do that against somebody that's as hungry and as much of a shark in there as Diego Lopes. So what I think you do, now Diego Lopes is ranked 3. I don't think he's going to be in there for a title shot next. I was considering a Volkanovski matchup for him, but I think a better matchup is, given the storyline that he has with Movsar. In about 3 weeks time, 2.5 weeks time, you have Movsar Evloev and Aljamain Sterling going up against each other at UFC 307 in Salt Lake City on the Pereira Roundtree card. 3 weeks, same timetable. That's what you do. Winner of Movsar and Aljo fights Diego Lopes. Winner of that gets a title shot. And you know, the UFC loves this matchup of Aljo and Movsar because it's two guys that they definitely don't want as featherweight champion. So you have them fight each other. Loser has to fight it back down in the rankings and defend his spot. Winner fights Diego Lopes and probably loses. So it's a win-win for the UFC. So we move on. Brian Ortega. Now this is my most interesting pick for this video. 1,000%. Brian Ortega was going to move up to 155 pounds regardless because the UFC apparently told him that there is no title shot for him at 145 pounds. So, you know, I was thinking about Oliveira and how cool would that be, and like all these different matchups. But Oliveira versus Michael Chandler at MSG UFC 309 has been announced. Brian Ortega takes this fight on short notice at 145 pounds, originally for UFC 303, has to cut from 175 to 145 in like 2 weeks. And maybe they did it at lightweight, but he makes weight and then pulls out the day of. Dan Ige fills in, fights Diego Lopes, and then they ended up rebooking Ortega versus Lopes at the Sphere, where he lost to Diego Lopes. I don't think he should have taken this fight at all because he's been so adamant about moving up to 155 pounds that it seems exactly like I said for weeks leading up to this fight that they were throwing Ortega a bag because of his Hispanic heritage to be on Noche, and they're using his number 3 ranking to leapfrog Diego Lopes to the top of the division. And then Ortega can do what he wants. He can fight another prospect. He could fight Aljo or Movsar. He could move up, whatever. Now, he has talked about 155 pounds. That makes me think he's cooked at 145. He's not committed, and overall, didn't seem like he wanted to be in there for much of that fight. That's just what I saw in there. So I think you move Brian Ortega up to 155 pounds like he has talked about, and this might be a little bit out of left field. This might be out of the blue for some of you. I'm thinking about matchups for Brian Ortega. Charles Oliveira would be fun, but now he's booked. Beneil Dariush, we don't know what he's going to do. Gamrot just fought. Dan Hooker is probably looking for a bigger matchup than this. Sarukian's waiting for a title shot. Gaethje and Poirier might fight each other. Connor's got to fight somebody. I think stylistically an amazing matchup, name value, and an amazing matchup. You do Brian Ortega. Hear me out, guys. I'm not crazy on this one. Hear me out. You do Brian Ortega against Paddy Pimblett. Tell me that's not a sick fight. Both of them pretty sus on the feet. Both of them amazing jiu-jitsu. I swear, you put Brian Ortega, because he said he wants to move up to 55. You move him up to 55, Paddy Pimblett, that's a great matchup. Paddy Pimblett, if he gets a win, that's a huge win for him as well. And Brian Ortega, if he wins, you give him like a Beneil Dariush, or loser of Islam and Sarukian if they fight, or loser of Oliveira and Chandler, something like that. But I think Brian Ortega is going to be at lightweight next, and I think you do it against Paddy Pimblett. I think it makes a lot of sense. So here's my fights to make after Noche UFC. I have Merab Dvalishvili against Davison Figueiredo, even though it'll probably be Umar. Sean O'Malley versus Cory Sandhagen. Valentina Shevchenko against Manon Fior. Alexa Grasso against the loser of Aaron Blanchfield and Rose Namajunas that are fighting on November 2nd. Diego Lopes against the winner of Aljamain Sterling and Movsar Evloev. They're fighting at UFC 307. And then Brian Ortega versus Paddy Pimblett. So let me know what you guys think about my fights to make after Noche UFC in the comments down below. Thank you. Hey guys, thank you for watching this video. Make sure to like, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff. It really helps me out a lot. If you're interested in supporting the channel further, then become a channel member today for access to members only live streams, vlogs, and some other members perks. So click the link in the description down below or the join button on our channel homepage to become a member today. If you're interested in some non-MMA content from me, go check out my personal channel, Wyatt's World, and go check out my weekly comedy podcast, What's Up Bro, with Wyatt and Bo. Both of those are linked in the description down below. Go watch this suggested video, and we'll see you next time.